To the Creator and nobody else. So since we have people who still don't understand that the Sabbath days they put in the Bible are actually the double Sabbath days and not the Creator Sabbath days, since they really fail to realize that the devil is the one that messed up the Bible by putting that King James Version in, which is not our original book, and he sat up there and twisted even some of the, or a lot of the laws, and even messed with a couple of the commandments. This is all fact. If you have watched the video so far, you have seen this. But since people didn't get it, and I thought I didn't have to show a whole lot more videos, apparently I got to show a whole lot more videos because people did not even watch the videos because they didn't like the fact of the title or they couldn't handle the truth when they read the title. Well, I'm sorry. Y'all need to open your eyes, use your listening ears, and ask the Creator to show you something that you can't see. Because obviously, he has not shown y'all. So I'm going to keep on showing a whole bunch of these videos until people get into their thick skulls that these Sabbath days that y'all be doing is of the devil because he stuck them in there. Period. That King James Bible teach you how to serve the devil. Buy older books. Spend some damn money. Something better than a Fertiligen. What the fuck you want to call that book? Spend $2,000. If you spend $50 and you get an older book, then come talk to me. Until you've done that, don't waste your time talking to me. Because you don't know what I know. Now I'm going to keep proving what I know by showing these videos that's been proven it beyond a shadow of a doubt. 50 other people got these same videos proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that if you are doing any of those feast days, you are serving the devil because those are not even our feast days. Those are Anunnaki, fallen angel, devil worship feast days. Come from Babylon, Egyptology, Kemet, witchcraft, and a whole bunch of other shit. Look it up. But hold on, don't go nowhere. I'm about to show you again, and it's going to get worse. So keep watching and don't blink. You might miss something.
The books of the Maccabees are the last historical accounts in the Old Testament. They take place approximately from 167 BC to 160 BC. There is no recorded history of the Jewish people in the Bible after the second book of the Maccabees. It's also noteworthy to point out that the second book of Maccabees is not a continuation of the first book of Maccabees, but instead is the same story, but with just a greater theological emphasis. The books of the Maccabees are the last historical accounts of the Jews in the Bible before the first coming of Christ. The Old Testament tells the saga of Israel, and the books of the Maccabees are the very end of that story before the coming of Christ. This project, Maccabean Uprising, is dedicated to demonstrating how the entire history of the Israelites is a complete prefigurement of the actual history of the Catholic Church, in chronological order. For a quick 6-minute video that demonstrates this amazing act of God, click on this video link. The first book of the Maccabees begins with Alexander the Great, the Greek conqueror who defeated the Persian Empire. Alexander was very young, and he ruled from approximately the late fall of 336 BC until the summer of 323 BC. The first book of Maccabees tells us he reigned for 12 years. After his conquests, he died suddenly. Upon his death, his vast empire was split into 4 parts by his generals Seleucus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Lysimachus. There were a series of battles and wars that followed the death of Alexander, as his generals strove to increase their territory and power. The power struggle between the Seleucid kingdom and the Ptolemaic kingdom was the most notable, and it played out in a series of wars known as the Syrian Wars. For over 100 years, the Ptolemaic and the Seleucid kingdoms battled back and forth. Judea and Jerusalem laid at the border of these two kingdoms and was a contested area. In that time, the name for the region of Israel and Syria was called Kole Syria. From the first book of Maccabees. Now it came to pass, after that Alexander, the son of Philip the Macedonian, who first reigned in Greece, coming out of the land of Chetham, had overthrown Darius, king of the Persians and Medes. He fought many battles, and took the strongholds of all, and slew the kings of the earth. And he went through even to the ends of the earth, and took the spoils of many nations, and the earth was quiet before him. And he gathered a power, a very strong army, and his heart was exalted and lifted up. And he subdued countries of nations and princes, and they became tributaries to him. And after these things he fell down upon his bed, and knew that he should die. And he called his servants the nobles that were brought up with him from his youth, and he divided his kingdom among them, while he was yet alive. And Alexander reigned 12 years, and he died. And his servants made themselves kings, every one in his place, and they all put crowns upon themselves after his death, and their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. From Wikipedia. The Syrian Wars were a series of 6 wars between the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, successor states to Alexander the Great's empire, during the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, over the regions they called Kole Syria, one of the few avenues into Egypt. These conflicts drained the material and manpower of both parties, and led to their eventual destruction and
I want y'all to pay close attention, because this video is going to expose how these devils change your feast days. And that's how you serving the wrong feast days. You're doing the days they want you to do. The devil's feast days. Pay attention. All y'all, especially the teachers.
Conquest by Rome and Parthia. They are briefly mentioned in the biblical books of the Maccabees. The vast empire of Alexander the Great encompassed the entire ancient world. Because the Greeks controlled the whole ancient world, they were able to standardize the currency and the economy of their empire. The Greek language became the universal language and of culture, commerce, and learning. All the traditional cultures of the ancient world learned Greek. They adopted Greek customs, dresses, and practices. This was the first period in the history of the ancient world that there was truly an international trade market for local merchants. The Greeks were also the most sophisticated and advanced civilization that any in the ancient world had ever experienced. They were far advanced in terms of science, philosophy, art, architecture, and civics. Their overwhelming effect on local cultures was a powerful influence and drew many traditional peoples out of their way of life and into the universal modern Greek world. The general effect that Greek culture and influence had on the entire ancient world was called Hellenization. The seduction of Greek culture and the social and economic benefits of adopting Greek beliefs, customs, and practices was too much for some Jews to bear. Many of the Jews in Jerusalem at that time wanted to Hellenize Judaism and Jerusalem. They were opposed by traditional Jews who wanted to keep their holy religion free from foreign intrusions and perversions.
Are you paying attention?
Jewish men took part in the Greek games, which were always done in the nude. Because their circumcisions betrayed their adherence to Judaism, they undid their circumcisions by making foreskins for themselves. In Scripture, it says they made themselves prepuces, which is a word for foreskin. From Wikipedia, Hellenization is the historical spread of the ancient Greek culture and, to a lesser extent, language over foreign peoples conquered by Greeks or brought into their sphere of influence. particularly during the Hellenistic period following the campaigns of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC. The result of Hellenization was that elements of Greek origin combined in various forms and degrees with local elements. These Greek influences spread from the Mediterranean basin as far east as modern-day Pakistan. During the Hellenistic period, following the death of Alexander the Great, considerable numbers of Assyrians, Jews, Egyptians, Persians, Parthians, Armenians, and a number of other ethnic groups along the Balkans, Black Sea, Southeast Mediterranean, Anatolia, Middle East, and Central Asia were Hellenized. And from the first book of Maccabees, in those days there went out of Israel wicked men, and they persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathens that are around about us. For since we departed from them, many evils have befallen us. And the word seemed good in their eyes. And some of the people determined to do this, and they went to the king, and he gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathens.
Say what?
And they built a place of exercise in Jerusalem according to the laws of the nations.
Exactly.
And they made themselves prepuces,
And y'all still
and
doing it
departed from
today.
the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathens, and were sold to do evil.
And y'all still doing it today. Ain't shit changed.
The
Y'all still
Hellenizing
doing
Jews made overtures to the Greek king of the Seleucid Empire, King Antiochus IV, who called himself Epiphanes, which means the illustrious one. King Antiochus, out of disdain for faithful Jews, arrogantly marched into the temple and took down all the ornaments, and also took the sacred vessels and instruments. After doing this, he left to go back to Antioch, the capital city of the Seleucid Empire. Because of this sacrilege, the Jews were deeply disturbed, and a great confusion covered the people. From the first book of Maccabees, chapter 1. And after Antiochus had ravaged Egypt in the 143rd year, he returned and went up against Israel. And he went up to Jerusalem with a great multitude. And he proudly entered into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar, and the candlestick of light, and all the vessels thereof, and the table of proposition, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the little mortars of gold, and the veil, and the crowns, and the golden ornament that was before the temple, and he broke them all in pieces. And he took the silver and gold, and the precious vessels, and he took the hidden treasures which he found, and when he had taken all away, he departed into his own country. And he made a great slaughter of men, and spoke very proudly. And there was great mourning in Israel, and in every place where they were. And the princes and the ancients mourned, and the virgins and the young men were made feeble, and the beauty of the women was changed. Every bridegroom took up lamentation, and the bride that sat in the marriage bed mourned. And the land was moved for the inhabitants thereof, and all the house of Jacob was covered with confusion.
Just like today. Y'all double worshiping. Doing their feast days.
Some years later, after Antiochus removed the sacred vessels and ornaments from the temple, he sent men to Jerusalem, who slaughtered many and took women and children as captives. They built a stronghold inside the city of Jerusalem called the Acra. The Jews of Jerusalem fled, and the city became a place for the pagan Greeks. They defiled the sanctuary. From the first book of Maccabees, chapter 1. And after 2 full years, the king sent the chief collector of his tributes to the cities of Judah. And he came to Jerusalem with a great multitude. And he spoke to them peaceable words in deceit, and they believed him. And he fell upon the city suddenly, and he struck it with great slaughter, and he destroyed much people in Israel. And he took the spoils of the city, and burnt it with fire, and threw down the house thereof, and the walls thereof round about. And they took the women captive, and the children, and the cattle they possessed. And they built the city of David with a great and strong wall, and with strong towers, and made a fortress for them. And there they placed there a sinful nation, wicked men, and they fortified themselves therein. And they stored up armor and victuals, and they gathered together the spoils of Jerusalem. And they laid them up there, and they became a great snare. And this was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary, and an evil devil in Israel. And they shed innocent blood round about the sanctuary, and defiled the holy place. And the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled away by reason of them. And the city was made the habitation of strangers. And she became a stranger to her own seed, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary was desolate like a wilderness. Her festival days were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach. Her honors were brought to nothing. After Jerusalem was firmly in the hands of the Greeks, and the faithful had fled away, Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that they should all abandon the laws and traditions of their fathers. He mandated that all his kingdom should follow the laws of the Greeks concerning religion and sacrifice. The Sabbath worship was prohibited by Antiochus, and he commanded that the holy places were to be profaned. From the first book of Maccabees, chapter 1. And King Antiochus wrote to all his kingdom that all the people should be one, and everyone should leave his own law. And all nations consented according to the word of King Antiochus. And many of Israel consented to his service, and they sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by the hands of messengers to Jerusalem and to all the cities of Judah, that they should follow the law of the nations of the earth, and should forbid holocausts and sacrifices and atonements to be made in the temple of God. And they should prohibit the Sabbath and the festival days to be celebrated. And he commanded the holy places to be profaned, and the holy people of Israel. And he commanded altars to be built, and temples and idols, and swine's flesh to be immolated, and clean.
So in other words, they took away your feast days and gave you their feast days, forced you to do it in slavery, and then make sure they put in that King James Version Bible. And all the feast days in that King James Version Bible are the feast days of the devil. Why the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, the Khazarians, and other different, what they call them, religions are doing those feast days that y'all doing? Huh? Answer me that. Because they for the devil. And here's your proof. Keep watching, especially the teachers. You need to know. Because I'm tired of y'all using that King James Version Bible, which deliberately teaches how to serve the devil. We are completely destroyed. He meant what he said.
Unclean beasts, and that they should leave their children uncircumcised, and let their souls be defiled with all uncleanness and abominations, to the end that they should forget the law, and should change all the justifications of God. And that whosoever would not do according to the word of King Antiochus should be put to death. According to all these words he wrote to his whole kingdom, and he appointed rulers over the people that should force them to do these things. And they commanded the cities of Judah to sacrifice. Then many of the people were gathered to them that had forsaken the law of the Lord. And
He commanded y'all to sacrifice to their devils and put in the King James Version Bible. Y'all devil worshiping. Keep watching, teachers.
Committed evils in the land. And they drove away the people of Israel into lurking holes and into the secret places of fugitives.
Just watch how y'all devil worshiping. Keep on watching that.
After Antiochus invades and desecrates Jerusalem, he then proceeds to do the unthinkable. In an effort to break the Jewish people completely, he places the abomination of desolation on the holy altar in the temple. He does this on the 15th day of the month of Kislev. He then erects a second altar over and against the holy altar of God in the temple, and then performs a new, profane sacrifice on that second altar. He cut the book of the law into pieces and viciously persecuted those who kept the book of the law and who circumcised their children. He set up new altars all over Judea for his new mandated pagan sacrifice. During this time, women thrust themselves into the temple holy places where it was unlawful for them to go. The first book of Maccabees, chapter 1. On the 15th day of the month of Caslev, in the 145th year, King Antiochus set up the abominable idol of desolation upon the altar of God, and they built altars throughout all the cities of Judah round about. And they burnt incense and sacrificed at the doors of the houses and in the streets. And they cut in pieces and burnt with fire the books of the law of God. And every one with whom the books of the testament of the Lord were found, and whosoever observed the law of the Lord, they put to death, according to the edict of the king. Thus by their power did they deal with the people of Israel, that were found in the cities month after month. And on the 5th and 20th day of the month they sacrificed upon the altar of the idol that was over against the altar of God. And now the women that circumcised their children were slain, according to the commandment of King Antiochus.
And y'all still doing the
and they
same
hanged the
things
children
today.
about their
Double
necks
worship.
in all their houses, and those that had circumcised them they put to death. And many of the people of Israel determined with themselves that they would not eat unclean things, and they chose rather to die than to be defiled with unclean meats.
Right.
And they would not break the holy law of God, that they were put.
So they tricked y'all in Christianity with that King James Bible, which is a Christian book, the devil's book, to do their feast days. They changed your feast days. They changed your laws and ordinances and put it right in that King James Bible. And when you read them scriptures and tell them to do those laws, you're telling them to devil worship. Now do you see why I have a problem? We're going to pause this. We're going to come back. These devils change your feast days. Part 2. Peace and love.